Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Ask an Expert. We're excited to be here with you all and our special guest, Mike Mitchell. We will first dive into an introduction and brief discussion before opening it up to a Q&A session. Please leave any questions that you may have throughout the live stream in the live chat. Without further ado, let's get into it. Mike Mitchell is the co-owner of Mitchell Funeral Homes in Michigan and has nearly 2 decades of experience in providing green burial services. Mike is also one of the only licensed funeral directors with an environmental science degree. Welcome, Mike. We are happy to have you here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks, Ed. I'm really happy to be here, and apparently so is my black lab, Lily. So she's going to say hi every once in a while. I started in the business in probably the early 90s. I did a year of internship at a service or a funeral home here in Michigan in St. Joe, and I attended mortuary school. And all of a sudden I said, you know what? I'm 22 years old. I'm not mature enough to do this. So I went back to school and got a job in Yellowstone National Park.
Can I hear it on that?
Yes, but it's going to reverb.
I can hear you, Ed. There's a little bit of a delay.
Mute yourself.
So
You won't allow me to mute.
that's all right. You're muted now. So I worked in Yellowstone Park in the season of 1994, and my paying job was cleaning 18 hotel rooms a day. Fast forward to 1995, I had got into Michigan State and joined a program called Environmental Resource Development. And from there, I garnered a lot of interest and a lot of studying in environmental services. 1995, I was a naturalist assistant for Old Faithful Station when the wolves were reintroduced back in Yellowstone. And from there, I graduated from Michigan State with a degree in environmental science and natural resource policy study. Going through it real quick, I was a deputy water resource commissioner for Ingham County, and I worked for an environmental consulting firm for a period of time specializing in wetland mitigation site selection, stormwater management, and stream bank bioengineering. And early in the 2000s, when the bottom fell out of the economy, I was one of several hundred laid off from this company. And my father decided to retire from the funeral industry and the business he had started or took over in 1981. And my brother asked me if I would come back, and I said no 3 times. And on the 4th time we worked it out. I worked for a year just getting used to the industry again, and then went back to mortuary school at the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science. And shortly after graduating from there and earning and getting my funeral director's license, I went to a Michigan Funeral Directors Association convention and started learning about green burial. And from there, it's just been full on. I met a great woman, RN death doula, really just sort of an all-around great woman named Marilyn Rush. And together we have helped out many families, and it continues to be my passion to help provide green, natural death care, in-home funerals and vigils to whomever wishes to do it. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. It is such an honor, and I'm honored to be here today to give more information about it.
Thanks, Mike. Bear with me one moment, Mike. Thank you,
Okay.
Mike. That's really great to learn a little bit about you and all the wonderful things that you've done and how you kind of got into this. I think the viewers themselves really would like to know what a natural burial looks like from the funeral director's perspective.
Sure.
So if you could explain kind of the start to finish of what a family might expect when they want these services from a funeral director and all of that.
I think one of the biggest things that can help facilitate the process of a natural green burial or any type of non-conventional funeral, if you will, is the use, the advent, and the direction from a death doula, a hospice nurse, because they assist in the transition from a home or a hospital or a facility to our care. And those people have been instrumental to us in the state of Michigan and southeastern Michigan. Hospice is just fantastic. So whether you do a green burial or not, my first piece of advice to anyone is please get enrolled in hospice. At least here where I'm at, if you're enrolled in hospice, there's no need to call a medical examiner, which we call them here in Michigan, or a coroner, which they would call them in other states. In my county where I live and operate, we don't have to call the medical examiner for every death. If you're enrolled in hospice, it's an easy pronouncement from a hospice nurse. There's no need to call 911. There's no authorities that come. There's no police investigation. So that's paramount. But really from there, it's, do you want to keep your loved one, your person at home? Do you want us to take them into our care at the funeral home? Do we want to use dry ice? Do we want to just keep someone at home for as long as possible and then figure out where the burial is going to be? So it's very similar to a conventional funeral where folks call us and say, hey, this is it. The big difference is in how we care for the body and really, honestly, how we don't care for the body, because we're not using toxic chemicals. We're not using embalming fluid. We're not doing invasive processes that embalming is to someone. We're actually utilizing either normal ice or dry ice, and then we're insulating the cool, similar to where you would put layers on if you were doing winter camping or winter hiking. We like to insulate that cold, and the utilization of dry ice is probably one of the greatest things I've learned in death care, because I not only use it for green services, but sometimes there's instances where I have to use it for a conventional service. And it's just the uses that we can use or use dry ice for have just expounded what we're able to do for families. So insulating the body has helped tremendously. And sometimes we do a little bit of posing the features, sometimes we don't. And most of the times I'm using a shroud, but sometimes we'll use a kosher casket. And a kosher casket, I need to back up, because what we do with green burial and natural burial is not a new process. It is an ancient sacred process that most of the world does. And it's now, we're kind of, one of the things I always say is we're looking back to move forward in death care. Most of the world does this. We're learning that, yeah, this is a great thing, and it's another option for families, and it's good for everybody. So I just had to have a little tangent there. Getting back to how we deal with the body and using a ceremonial wash made up of, a liquid that's comprised of maybe some alcohol, some rose hips, some scented water that actually will do some cleansing of the body, and the family can participate in that. So we can either do that at home, we can do it at the funeral home. It's whatever is best for the family is what we do. So as we move forward, we can have a service, we can do it at the home. We can, there's a few areas that will allow us to go to a meadow. We have several churches now that are on board with it. We have multiple cemeteries in our area that are now on board doing the burial. And it's like most funerals where we're caring for someone that's passed away, but it's got such more of a meaningful touch because these folks have been A to Z, and they're in the home or they're in the funeral home and they're participating in the event. And even in the cemetery, some cemeteries will allow the families to actually do the lowering into the grave. Some will allow the filling in of the grave. Most cemeteries around here will not allow the family to dig, but some will. It just depends on what their experience is and how long they've been doing it. And as time moves on, we're seeing more and more participation allowed at the cemetery as well. Michigan's kind of interesting because I can't own or operate a cemetery. So the cemeteries are always separate and they have their own rules and regulations, but we've convinced several in our area that this is a good thing. It's not going away. And my famous, I don't know if it's famous, but one of my favorite sayings is, I heard it from Joe Seehey a long time ago. My industry, the funeral industry, fought cremation and it didn't work very well. So I embrace green burial. It is natural. It is what we used to do. It is a wonderful thing to allow families to do. And there's very little certification that you need to do it. In Michigan, you have to be a licensed funeral director to witness final disposition and to do, the broad law is putting chemicals on a decedent. But other than that, signing a death certificate, leading a funeral procession, that's about all you need a funeral director to do. But we do a lot more than that. Does that sum it up?
Absolutely, Mike. And, some of the questions that I've seen coming in, we have one from Kelly in Arizona who would like to know, is natural burial legal in all states? And it's a twofold question. And do I need to have a funeral director to be involved?
So I think that's really a state by state question. In Michigan, those examples I used, place chemicals on a decedent, lead a funeral procession, witness final disposition, sign a death certificate. Oh, it's been a long time since I took my exam, but I believe that's basically it. In my state, my home state in Michigan, you don't have to be licensed to transport from place of death to the funeral home or to a home. I always put this caveat to it. However, most people are not used to seeing what we see on a daily basis when we go to a large hospital, an institution, a nursing home. Daily basis. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, some reverb. Sorry.
Oh. So it varies state by state, and I would actually direct you to the Arizona Funeral Directors Association and see exactly what you can and can't do in your home state. I know that I've helped a person that was in Maryland bring her mother's body back to Michigan, and she was able to do the death certificate by herself. She found a funeral home in the area that was willing to sell her an alternative container, and we were able to keep her on dry ice throughout her journey and buried her in Jackson. So there's all kinds of different things you can do, but you always want to make sure to call that state association and see what you can and can't do. That would be my best advice.
Very good. We have a question from Rhode Island, and this Roger would like to know, is it necessary to have a certified provider offer these services, or could you use your local cemetery if they allow it? So that's a good question. I think that's something
That's a great question. And, a lot of us that are on the Global Green Burial Alliance started out in another organization, and you don't need a certification to do a green burial. You just have to make sure it's allowed and you find a funeral director that will help you, and you find a cemetery that will help you. I think a lot of our rural areas that I deal with here, they have more flexibility. So no, you do not need a certification to allow green burial to happen. Again, I don't know about all the rules out east, but here in Michigan and a lot of states, cemeteries make their own rules and regulations. So at least here in the Mitten State, a vault is a cemetery rule, not a state law. So it's not necessary, but again, it's a very personal choice. And a lot of people are turning to the green burial side of things and saying, yeah, I want to be part of something bigger. My last act, I want to be environmentally friendly. And what we found over the last 10 or 12 years is that, okay, there's really not that much more maintenance. The settling is a lot more even. I just went out this week a couple days ago. We had a pretty big rain event. And so I went and checked some green burials that I did recently. One was in May, another was in June, and another one was just last week. And we're pretty fortunate in our area that even with a conventional burial, our cemeterians and our grave diggers do the mounding anyways. But with this green burial or vaultless burial, there's no really sharp edges. So the soil settles easier and there's a lot less maintenance involved. I hope that answers your question.
No, I'm sure it did, Mike. And then we have a Jean Ann from Topeka, Kansas. And Jean Ann would like to know, when does a body have to be embalmed? And is there a green alternative to embalming? So I guess that would mean, Mike, if someone maybe was compromised, would there be an alternative to conventional embalming if it was necessary?
Well, I can't speak for other folks. I know that, again, with what we've learned working with Marilyn Rush and a few other death doulas and hospice folks, and even actually my son's physics professor, dry ice is an amazing agent. And it's not only helps control decomposition, but for those of you that are in the industry and professional, it is a phenomenal cauterizing agent. So I have used dry ice on autopsied cases, on traumatic blunt force trauma. And my answer, because of my experience and I'm comfortable, no, it is not necessary. And Michigan has a law that states a body has to be embalmed, buried, or cremated within 72 hours. And I'll just give you the example of this week. We are utilizing refrigeration and dry ice to help keep everything stable, because it's taken us 5 days to get a doctor to sign a death certificate. And I can't do anything unless that certificate is signed. And without the aid of dry ice, it would not be a good situation. So to circle back to your question, embalming is not necessary, and utilizing refrigeration via dry ice is a better agent than you could ever think of.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. I'm sure the viewers appreciate that.
One other thing, to kind of slam home the idea that dry ice is phenomenal, after we're done here, I think everyone should go look at a festival in Estes Park, Colorado. And this is a little bit macabre, but it will demonstrate how good dry ice is. There's a gentleman called Grandpa Brito that has been frozen since 1989. And until 2022, he was kept in an insulated sarcophagus with dry ice. And every couple of weeks, or I can't remember the time frame, but they would replenish the dry ice. And in 2022, a cryogenic company got wind of this, and he was moved into a cryo unit at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park where he is resting forever. But they have created a festival called the Frozen Dead Guy Days. And it's all about Grandpa Brito, and it's all about him, his life, and his death. And that will show you what dry ice can do.
Thanks, Mike, for that. That's very valuable information. We have a William from Utah who would like to know, can I have a viewing for my loved one with a natural burial? So that's a very good question.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sorry, it looks like I've been out in the Florida sun, but my camera's going red here. Yes, we have had, basically, we can do, or you can do, any type of service you want. You don't have to have the embalming. There are ways where we can keep the body hydrated through none other than Pond's cold cream. And that way the skin doesn't discolor. It might get a little dark in the dependent areas of the body, like the ear tips and the fingertips, but keeping the soft tissue of the face hydrated makes a big deal. And it allows for visitation. Again, dry ice is a powerful force, and you just got to get used to it, and you got to trust it and have some experience. But yes, visitation, not a problem. You just have to find somebody that knows how to do it.
Absolutely, Mike, and I can attest to that to the viewers as well. We've had some very beautiful services for family members who were able to spend time with their loved ones.
Yeah.
So I can concur with that. So we have a Lewis from California, and he's asking, can I have a natural burial if I'm an organ donor or have an autopsy? How does that work?
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit ago. Again, first and foremost, you have to find someone that knows how to do it. And the Global Green Burial Alliance is a great place to start. We've got providers all over the country. It's sorted by state, and it's even sorted by country. So find someone that's good with it. If you can't, give us a call, give me a call, and I can talk to a family-owned funeral home and we can walk them through it. It might be a little scary at first, but once you get used to it, yeah, you can do it.
Absolutely. So we have Marianne from Delaware. She's asking, what is the price difference between a traditional and a green burial? So that's kind of an open-ended question. I know, Mike, that's kind of difficult to answer, but I guess we can.
I think there's a couple of things. I think your regionality is going to greatly influence your cost, but in general, you're not going to have a burial vault. So that's a huge saving in and of itself. You're not going to have an embalming charge, but you are going to have a charge of sheltering the remains, possibly refrigeration, dry ice, a shroud or a casket. You might be able to make your own shroud or casket. So there's a cost savings in there, but under the service area for the funeral home, it depends on what you want. If you want a visitation, if you want a funeral, if you want a gathering of friends and family, if you want to do this at an alternative location like your home, there's different charges. But in general, the biggest cost savings is going to be the vault and potentially the casket, but not necessarily.
Absolutely. It's a very good answer to that. It is certainly a savings. We have an Alan from North Carolina who would like to know this is an interesting one. How might I approach a funeral director
Oh, I missed that. It froze up, Ed. Can anybody hear me? I'm going to do this real quick. Type your question here. Give us a minute here. We'll get back to you. Laura, thank you for texting me. Appreciate that. We just can't hear Ed right now. So I think I'm going to try to answer the question kind of like Wheel of Fortune before I heard the whole thing. But how do you approach a funeral director to get to do this? And my biggest thing is go to them early and ask questions. Are you familiar with this? Can you do this? And do some research and call around. And it might take a couple of phone calls. But again, start with the Global Green Burial Alliance and our members that have taken the pledge and see what they're comfortable doing. And again, if they don't know, have them pick up the phone and call me, and I can help them out. I can walk them through anything. I've done it for several folks in the Mountain West, out east. I helped a family in Missouri that they thought they could do it, then they didn't, and I directed her to a facility near her hometown, and they were able to work it out. She just, at the time, didn't feel comfortable doing it alone, so she called a professional, and I think that's what you got to do. You got to do some research. Hopefully, we'll get Ed back here in just a minute.
I have another question.
Oh, hold on. Somebody else has another question here.
It says, I don't think you've answered this. Can you have a natural burial if you are an organ donor or autopsy?
So can you have a natural or green burial if you are an organ donor? Absolutely, yes. The visitation part might be tricky on an organ donor, depending on what and how what's been donated or how tissue has been harvested. But yes, absolutely. And similarly to that, I've had folks ask a question, can I have a natural burial if I have an artificial joint? And at least here in Michigan, I cannot remove anything from a body that is not medically necessary. So the only thing that I can legally remove from a body is a pacemaker. And that's mostly dealing with cremation, because the pacemaker and the retort and the high temperatures don't get along well. But those are all excellent questions.
What if you had an autopsy?
The autopsy part, I think I answered. That's very, very, very common, and we've done that multiple times. And my wife is going to look at her phone and see if she can see any other questions.
I've answered. I'm up to everything.
Okay, so I think another thing that we can discuss is the advent of natural organic reduction or aquamation, and what works, what doesn't, where it's legal, where it's not. And, here we go. There's Ed back.
Hey, Mike. Hey, we can thank some inclement weather from the resident hurricane that's heading our way. So,
there's that.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks, but I'm back and live, and Mike, I'm sure that you held down the fort while I was gone. So thank you very much. But,
sure.
But with all that being said, I did have a question from, and I do hope I'm not interrupting. I have a question.
No, it's all good.
Question from Alan from North Carolina, and what he wanted to know was, he would like to know how he might go about approaching his local funeral home. I guess,
Oh, yeah.
in seeing if they would offer these services to his community.
Yeah, and what I talked about with my friend that's on the phone that honored me with helping her with her husband is ask questions. Just go to a funeral home, and I mean this with a lot of respect. You're going to get farther with a funeral home that's family owned than you are with a corporate, and that's just because the corporates have high paid, very expensive lawyers. And I don't think they want to take on the perceived liability of doing this. So if you start with a family-owned funeral home, you're going to get a lot farther and you're going to hear a lot less no's. So that would be my first question to them. And secondly is start with the Global Green Burial Alliance website and our providers that have taken the pledge to say, yes, we can do this. And, I've had a couple instances where folks have called us and we're in this network together. And we've even discussed, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? What are you doing? What have you seen in the past? And it's this great network. And it's really like a team and a family where we help one another. That would be my first suggestion. And then from there, just ask questions.
Very good advice, Mike. I don't see any other questions. If anyone has any other questions, please ask. I'd like to chime in a little bit and let everybody know that, it starts with people like Mike, to make a difference, and I'm going to put Mike on the spot in a moment and ask him a question myself. Mike chose this path and he found it, I'm sure, very fulfilling and enriching. And I know all funeral directors, they're there to help the community and they're there to help their families. And that's so important for people to understand that you're not in this alone. And, even though people ask if they can do it without a funeral director, you must remember that we really want this to be a memorable experience celebrating one's life and the life they lived. And, in death, sometimes things can happen that are less than memorable. So please do consider using someone like Mike or Mike himself, because it will make that experience that much more enriching. So I guess to end our podcast, I would like to ask Mike if he would share, a special moment or story with us about, maybe what really inspired him or what touched him when he offered these types of services to one of his families.
Oh, man. Okay. So Laura is on this call right now, and it's one of my more recent families that I've helped. And through this death care, we have become friends. And it was such a great process. It started many years ago, and she wasn't comfortable going to a hospital. She wasn't comfortable, and Bob wasn't comfortable going to a care facility. And, I talked earlier about you got to get hospice involved, and Bob was a very private person. So we thought this was going to be imminent, and this may have been a couple of years ago. And I called the medical examiner's office and I said, hey, look, this person, he's terminal. He's got this, and this, and he's not going to get better, but he's not on hospice. He's a very personal person and doesn't want all this intrusiveness involved. And I want to say, and Laura, you can help me out and type it in the comments. It was a couple years. And then I was on call one night and I got the call that Bob had died. And when I went to call her back, I had her number in my phone. And I went, what's going on here? This is interesting. And all of a sudden, I got a hold of the field examiner, the medical examiner's field investigator, and he said, we're not going. Everything is fine. We've got the family physician. They're going to sign, and they want to keep him at home for a while. And I said, perfect. And Laura was so sweet. She said, have we talked before? Have we done something? And I said, Laura, I have you in my cell phone, and forgive me for not knowing why, but there's a reason why I have you in my cell phone. We must have talked. We must have done and had a conversation. And Mary Lynn Rush was also involved. And we talked, and we had the beautiful in-home vigil, and Bob's son had come in from she had talked with Bob, and he said, I'd really like a natural burial. And Laura said, is that possible? And I said, absolutely. We can go to Dexter. It's a beautiful cemetery that allows green and natural burial. It's next to a wetland, next to a river. And just from talking about what she wanted and sort of interpreting her needs, we had this beautiful experience for her, her friends, her neighborhood. And it was real. And our friendship has evolved since then. And it really created this sense of community that used to be. I mean, people may have been born and married and buried and even embalmed on the same table or the same room in a house. And for her to have this for her husband was just the most intimate experience. And it created a friendship. And I never thought that providing someone with death care services or funeral services would make friends, but you get that connection with people that it's really hard to find, and it's a pure experience, and I am grateful for it. And I know I ranted and went on a tangent, but it really impacted how I do things. And Laura just texted me here and said, 4 years after emergency surgery, he did recover, but in 92, he didn't expect to live long. I contacted you to let you know I would want your help, and help you did. And Mary Lynn was instrumental as well. Thank you, Laura. It's just, I think in an interview I did at first, doing green burial and having people care for their dead, it's a look back in time, and having this to me really creates a sense of community, kind of like what we used to do. And people come to the house, they come to the cemetery, and it's really a celebration of life. And it's a good death, if I can say that.
Absolutely, Mike. Wonderful story and sentiment. And, I can attest to that as well, that, our families truly become our friends and our families. You walk through this journey with them, like you said, the intimacy, and when you see them again, it's always with a smile, and I think that's most important to say. So
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough. The Global Green Burial Alliance can't thank you enough, Mike. We're here to lean on. This is for our viewers and our consumers and our providers. Look to us. We're here to provide the answers. There's no obligation. The only obligation you have is to believe in what we believe in as strongly as we do. And it's pretty easy to do that. So, be passionate. And, this is our second live stream of Ask the Expert. And we're working out the kinks. Weather today was a little funny, but you held it together, Mike, and I do appreciate that. And we're looking to all of our future ones. And I had spoken, I'm going to speak to the audience here. I had spoken to Mike previously about maybe putting together some videos in the future. So maybe we can collaborate, and Mike can put some how-to videos together for people to better understand, and in particular providers to better understand the benefits of what we've spoken about today.
Yeah, I think some master classes are in order, and hopefully some cemeterians and funeral directors, we can all get together and just collaborate, which would be a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. So I would like to thank you again, Mike. Thank everyone for attending and asking questions. And until the next time, Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance. with Ask the Expert with Mike Mitchell. Thanks, everybody, and see you next time.
Thank you.